Yo, what's going on? Mike from Mike Talk Sports. With UFC 5 coming out on October 27th, there's been a significant amount of news to come out about the game, most notably about the damage system and the new Frostbite engine the game will be running. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down two significant quotes from UFC 5 gameplay developers in order to determine what is new about this damage system and what's new about this Frostbite engine. Am I the best UFC 4 player alive out there, guys? Of course I'm not, but one thing I can absolutely promise you guys is that out of anybody making UFC 4 or UFC 5 content, I have the most amount of experience and knowledge about the Frostbite engine. Why do I say that? Madden has been running the Frostbite engine over the last couple of years, and out of any UFC 4 or 5 gameplay guy, I have the most Madden experience. Most people don't play all that much Madden if they play UFC 4, and I'm somebody with a significant amount of Madden experience, so I really can touch upon the Frostbite engine to a significant degree, which I will be doing at the end of the video. Let's get into the first quote though. Cuts, bruising, and swelling accumulated in accurate locations based on the damage you inflict and take in the game, including over 64,000 possible combinations of facial damage a fighter can sustain. Causing a cut near opponent's eye can impair their vision and cause them to take more damage on that side as they don't see subsequent strikes as well. Bust an opponent's nose to potentially hinder their breathing and slow their stamina recovery, and take too many low calf kicks and your character will start to limp with related mobility decline. Authentic damage adds to a whole new layer of strategy. Also, added doctor stoppages and check-ins for injuries will be a part of UFC 5. Now we are going to get into the second quote and we're going to break it down, and I'm going to tell you guys what it all means for the UFC 5 gameplay. They also added that all new animations are going to be implemented for ground and pound elbows, but let's get into the second quote. So with the new damage system, you don't want to get hit this year. I think last year at the last UFC 4, you fish for hit reactions and you fish for knockouts. You didn't really care how much damage you sustained as long as your damage meter was somewhat recoverable. This year on UFC 5 with our new real impact system, you don't want to get hit. Elbows will cut you and change the meta of the game. If you get cut over your eyebrow, it affects your vision, but it's going to allow you to get more vulnerable on that side you're cut on. Essentially, your fighter can't see. Your fighter will have a hard time to throw up their block. It's going to affect the speed of their blocking coming up. So this is the number one concern I have for this game, guys. The second I heard the Frostbite engine will be implemented really brought me to negative flashbacks about Madden. So the difference between the old Maddens and the new Maddens with the Frostbite engine, guys, is scripted gameplay. This is one of the things I love about UFC video games, and the reason why I play them over any other sports game is because they have the least amount of scripted gameplay out of any other game. You pick up a game of Madden, guys, half of the catching animations are predetermined. It has zero to do with skill. It has nothing to do with user input. It's all predetermined nonsense that really take away the competitive user input aspect of the video game. This is exactly what is going to happen to UFC 5 with some of these damage aspects. So let's say your fighter gets a cut over their eye. Do I think there will be a visual over the screen to implement a system in which you can't see as well? Potentially, and I think this would be a good solution, but I don't think this is going to be the case. In my opinion, this new Frostbite engine will play very well with the AI, but once you get in there with a real opponent and they start to get a cut over their eye, they start to get their nose broken, the new UFC 5 Frostbite engine will have a certain amount of outcomes to happen if this happens in the game to you. So no longer will the gameplay be in the hands of the user. The Frostbite engine will start kicking in, and some of your user inputs that you input into your controller straight up will be completely ignored by the Frostbite engine, as it believes that you cannot see out of a certain side of your eye, so you shouldn't be able to block that side of your face. In reality, in fighting, this is not necessarily what happens. You could still block. It's just that your vision is impaired. I would like to see them implement this and not implement a system in which you randomly stop blocking. That is so gimmicky and it's very unpredictable. The significant factor I did want to touch upon in this video is when they said you don't want to get hit in this new version of UFC 5. I don't like how in UFC 4 you can go to war with Sergey Pavlovich versus a hard-hitting Alistair Overeem for 4 rounds, absorb an insane amount of strikes, and still see the 5th round. I think that's very unrealistic, and I like how UFC 5 and the developers are putting an emphasis on this and some of the realism with not being able to get hit as much. But they definitely need to be careful with this system. Players still like standing and banging, and in these scenarios, you don't want to see a bunch of round 1 knockouts in divisions such as 125, 135, 145, 155, because the reality of the situation is no matter how much you get hit at the top of the 145-pound division, for example, fighters still can absorb an insane amount of damage. Look at Max Holloway, for example. Almost every fighter he faces is able to absorb 100, 200, 300 significant strikes from Max. So just because there is a new damage system, I don't want this to mean the fights, no matter what, end very quickly if an absorbent amount of damage is sustained on the fighter. I want it to be very dependent on the division in which it's in. I do really like that they're adding doctor stoppages and doctor check-ins, but I don't want this to really deter from the overall gameplay. At the end of the day, nobody in online mode is going to want the fight to consistently be stopped, so hopefully they don't overdo it with the doctor stoppages and the ref check-ins. At the end of the day, there is a reason every single time in a real MMA fight, the doctor steps in or the ref steps in. There is a rain of boos that come down from the crowd. Nobody wants to see the action of the fight stop, and I hope this new Frostbite engine does understand that. Overall, elbows specifically on the ground really have been lacking in UFC 4. It's very bizarre that you can only elbow your opponent from side control or side saddle, so it's very nice to see they're putting a significant emphasis on elbows, as elbows and knees, of course, is what mainly causes cuts in fight. So I think you're definitely going to see an influx of Tony Ferguson fighters. You are definitely going to see an even bigger influx of John Jones fighters, which honestly absolutely sucks. But it's whatever. I do like the fact that implemented damage will be taking place, and it will be specific to a specific area on your face, so you can be able to target the left side of a guy's face if you've already hit it a couple times. I do like the realism of the damage system in UFC 5. I also really like the aspect that they added and mentioned that you will have reactions to strikes. People will be reactionary to the strikes, and what that means in UFC 4, every single fighter is more or less Marvin Vettori in the aspect that they can just run through a brick wall, nothing affects them, whereas in reality, fighters really do give reactions to strikes. Either they grimace in their face, they'll laugh, they'll point, they'll rub their nose, they'll rub their face where they got struck. That seems as though that will be implemented into UFC 5, and that will be very interesting to see. Overall, I do think these changes are extremely positive, but I am very nervous as a Madden player that the Frostbite engine will completely overhaul how UFC 5 is played and how fight games are played from now until the end of time. In the aspect of the competitive aspect of the game is somewhat taken away because of the cinematics and overall scriptedness and gimmick ability of the Frostbite engine. Again, I hope Frostbite learns from their mistakes that they've made with Madden, and they implement that into UFC 5 so it is a clean fight experience for the fight fans to pick up this game. Because again, at the end of the day, people care about gameplay. Do they care about the cinematics, and do they care about the visual aspect of the game? Of course they do, but that's not the most important part. The most important part, of course, is the gameplay, and it is the user input. So I hope Frostbite in UFC 5 does not take away from that. Thanks for listening to today's video of Mike Talk Sports. Let me know in the comment section below, do you agree or disagree with my takes on UFC 5? And what are your overall thoughts and reactions on this article I read to you guys? Again, if you enjoyed today's video, I really appreciate it. Smack that like and hit subscribe.